Hey everyone, welcome back to the Skyburst Podcast. Today's episode centers on a significant congressional event held on May the 1st, 2025, a public hearing titled Understanding UAP, Science, National Security and Innovation, hosted by the House Oversight and Accountability Committee. Now, if you've tried watching the original recording of that hearing, you'll know the sound quality was terrible. Distorted microphones, uneven levels, and background noise. It was difficult to follow. So I've taken the time to clean up the audio, balance the volume, and add subtitles, because this information deserves clarity. Our focus today is on the testimony of Dr. Eric Davies. Dr. Davies is a PhD theoretical physicist with deep expertise in general relativity, quantum field theory, and advanced aerospace propulsion systems. He was the catalyst for David Grush's investigation into government UAP shenanigans. He has held top secret, sensitive, compartmented information clearances and has been involved with multiple classified programs for the US government, including work for the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Air Force Research Laboratory, the Aerospace Corporation, a federally funded research development center that advises the US Air Force and Space Force on national security space projects. Dr. Davies is also known for his authorship of several Defense Intelligence Reference Documents, or DIRDs, commissioned under the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program, covering subjects like warp drives, traversable wormholes, and the engineering of space-time. In this hearing, Dr. Davies gives testimony before members of Congress. He speaks directly about crash retrieval programs, recovered craft and materials exhibiting properties that do not align with any known human manufacturing capabilities. He also outlines how some of these programs have been operating outside of congressional oversight, shielded behind defense contractors, classified funding channels, and a need-to-know access barrier. This is not speculation. This is formal testimony presented under oath to members of the United States Congress. So whether you're coming in with questions or already deep in the research, I encourage you to listen closely because this is one of the most direct disclosures we've seen in a public setting. I won't be speaking much in this episode as I would like the full gravity of what is said to land. And now, here's Dr. Eric Davies, testifying before Congress on the 1st of May, 2025. Let's roll the clip.
This is the situation with UAP, but in reverse. Ample evidence, even congressional testimony, attests to the scientific validity of UAP. But the response by members of the scientific community has been either A, to bury their heads in the sand, or B, to make baseless mockery of the courageous contrarians like Professor Loeb who seek the truth. Why is this so? Well, the reason is partially due to overclassification and a deliberate decades-long disinformation campaign by the U.S. Department of Defense and intelligence community. Unlike climate change, UAP and the non-human intelligence which control them very well could be an existential threat, as our moderator, Lou Elizondo, eloquently described in his book, aptly named Imminent. The scientific community needs to wake up to the reality of UAP, which represents the most monumental development since the Copernican Revolution. Consider the extraordinary report I received this weekend when a former U.S. Navy SH-60 Seahawk helicopter crew chief who was embarked on the carrier USS Dwight D. Eisenhower in 2021 described to me his recording on forward-looking infrared video of a metallic sphere at an altitude a few hundred feet above the ship traveling along a linear trajectory horizontal to the sea surface before it accelerated into the horizon at an incredible speed, disappearing completely. Upon landing, he discussed this with some of the pilots and the other air crew before transferring the FLIR footage to the carrier's intelligence officer. Moreover, this was not an isolated event. For the Eisenhower Strike Group, during that deployment, saw many instances of UAP, primarily F-18s, frequently encountering them at high altitude. And this topic was widely discussed by the Air Wing during the entire deployment. And later, fellow aircrew members of this crew chief from another squadron deployed on board the USS Gerald R. Ford and shared similar experiences. The crew chief also informed me that the secret laptops in their ready room provided access to a shared drive where numerous UAP sightings on FLIR were archived. They stored these videos on a folder named Range Fowlers. You'd like that, Ryan. And, and his commanding officer and safety officer were aware of these incidents, but there was an unspoken understanding not to discuss them openly in the ready room. I have spoken to other sailors still on active duty, and their sightings of UAP have become so numerous that they are desensitized to the phenomena. My point being that the Navy possesses a trove of video evidence and data regarding UAP, and I see no reason why FLIR footage of UAP at Navy training ranges could not be declassified and shared with the scientific community. With open access to more data like this, we could transform every institution of higher education by establishing a Galileo project within their astronomy and astrophysics departments, a Soul Foundation within their biomedicine and humanities programs, and an archive of the impossible in their religious studies and philosophy curricula. To close, I point out that last month at the Endless Frontiers Conference in Austin, the President's Science Advisor, Michael Kratsios, committed the Trump administration to creating a golden age in American innovation. I am convinced that UAP research can not only support this, but accelerate it in ways beyond our imagination. The time to destroy the stigma associated with UAP is now. I ask the House Oversight Committee and other members of Congress to demand the DoD, DOE, DHS, and NASA release more UAP data for open science. And I call on the White House to include UAP research in its 2025 R&D priorities memo. Thank you all.
I'm an astrophysicist and also what Mark Mills at NASA and I call a breakthrough propulsion physicist. So worked on breaking propulsion together from 1996 to 2002, and then we continued after that to develop a book that we published in the AIAA Press in 2009 for tips of propulsion science. So my background is in advanced deep space and interstellar space flight, mostly terrestrial light propulsion through the use of general relativity theory and quantum field theory, as well as advanced nuclear propulsion like nuclear fission and nuclear fusion. And lead energy propulsion, which I've worked on as a principal investigator for the Air Force Research Lab at Edwards Air Force Base. So I've got quite a broad background. And I began my work in UFOs or UAP starting in 1996 when Robert Bigelow hired me to work for him as his director of aerospace physics and astrophysics at the National Institute for Discovery Science. And that was a pretty transformative job for you because as a physical scientist, I'm seeing for the first time odd phenomena. I'm investigating it using forensic science techniques in the field, interviewing witnesses, collecting data. And I have a team of colleagues on the staff that I work with, also PhDs. And we have a world-class science advisory board, which my former boss in Austin, Hal Twelve, was on the board of directors, was on that science advisory board and was the last chairman of that board, actually. We also had Apollo 14 astronaut Ed Mitchell, and for a short time, Apollo 17 astronaut Jack Schmidt. And we had many academicians and former CIA, national intelligence officers, social psychologists, medical doctors, and nuclear engineers, and the list goes on. We had Chuck Bellini primarily as well. So it was a really transformative because I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and I became familiar with Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan and astronomer Dorothy Page co-authored a book called UFOs, A Scientific Debate, which was published by the AAAS Press. The AAAS is the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and Science is their prestigious journal that they publish. And so that was a prestigious publication. Every chapter was authored by experts in the field in academia who have studied UFOs and some angle of it from a scientific data standpoint. Data that was collected, data that was analyzed. And so they presented it, published the book. For a bizarre reason, in the 1980s, Carl Sagan had his wonderful astronomy show called Cosmos, and the companion book for that. And what's ironic is that he changed 180 degrees. He all of a sudden went from being UFOs we have in this book that I co-authored or co-edited with Dorothy Page, all of this wonderful data that's been collected that is not explainable due to conventional astronomical, weather, or man-made explanations or events or objects. I'm now calling it pseudoscience. It's fringe science. People are mistaken. Pilots have poor vision, military pilots especially. And I've heard that from Leonard David. who's a aerospace engineering, aviation, space exploration writer. And people like him have said that our military pilots, especially the ones at the USS Nimitz, during its encounter of the Tic Tac UAP back in November of 2004, oh yes, those pilots have poor vision. They're flying what, $20 million fighter aircraft?
Yeah, 41
And they
million.
have poor vision. How did they get through the Naval Aviation Program and Top Gun School with poor vision?
Dr. James, could you elaborate a little bit on your, again, to really interrupt?
Oh, I don't know. So it was a transformative issue for me, or a job. It transformed my worldview. It opened up my worldview to a lot more possibilities than what I was used to thinking. As a trained PhD physicist, I earned my doctorate in astrophysics at the University of Arizona in '99. And so I worked on 3 space missions in graduate school. The IRAS, which is the Infrared Astronomical Satellite Program, and the 2 Voyager missions to the outer planets. So it's pertaining to the topic that Lou wants to talk about. I'm not trying to avoid it. It is a sensitive subject. It's due to astronaut Ed Mitchell, Dr. Ed Mitchell, Captain USA retired. Because of him, and I won't go into a long story, but it's because of him that I got on the trail of looking for the so-called legend within the UFO community. The retrieval of crashed or landed UAP craft, or UFO craft as they were known back in those days. And by the way, UAP, the term unidentified aerial phenomenon, goes back to the 1940s even. So I followed this trail, and I ended up, over the course of the following 2.5 decades, working for Bigelow, working for the Air Force Research Lab, working for Help Put Off at Urtech International Incorporated, and then working at the Aerospace Corporation. So we're working in a combination of industry and classified programs that we were contracted to do on behalf of the Defense Intelligence Agency and for the Pentagon agencies that Lou worked at, and the UAP task force that Jim Stratton led at the Office of Naval Intelligence. And so, a long story short is that I came into contact with industry leaders, technical scientists, both active duty and later retired, as well as intelligence officers, generals, admirals, colonels, people who directed intelligence or human intelligence collection and analysis directorates at the DIA and the Central Intelligence Agency, who reached out to me to have me do some foreign UAP intelligence analysis and assessment. And so I have been exposed to so much in the classified realm that I can tell you definitively that there is a there. The human race, basically the world's biggest governments, like the United States, our adversary, China and Russia, at least as far as I know, have had the occasion to recover craft that have either landed or crashed or both in their territory or even outside of their territories, and have taken those back to the most sensitive of their programs that they've ever had. These programs are even more sensitive and more well hidden than the Manhattan Project was, or the modern nuclear weapons industry and the U.S. military and the Department of Energy programs to maintain and upgrade and modernize our nuclear weapons arsenal. And so this is one of the most well hidden programs. It is hidden from congressional oversight. It always has been, and it was hidden by the action of President Eisenhower, who instituted presidential emergency action directives during his administration. These directives are not shared with Congress. They are classified. And when the Freedom of Information Act was instituted in the 70s, those are not subjected to the Freedom of Information Act request. These directives provide cover for actions that are associated with the retrieval of these vehicles and the scientific engineering study of them. And that takes place within the industry. What happens is the Department of Defense offices, CIA offices, they create shell companies. They give a sole source contract to the shell company, who passes the money to a selected group of defense industry firms. And those firms will take that contract money and turn them around and use that as internal funding. It's called internal research and development funds. which they give to their own people inside their country, their own employees, to do the reverse engineering and analysis and study of these recovered vehicles. And so this avoids all congressional oversight. It avoids the Gang of Eight. And it's one of the most clever techniques used to hide it. And as far as I know, only one 4-star general and 1 3-star admiral were able to locate these programs. And that's about as much as I can say. They located the programs and they uncovered them. One got a lot of resistance and hostile reception and was told that he found who he was looking for. They were who they were suspected of being. Yes, they were a UFO, UAP, crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. The other one had a lot more political power behind him because of his stature as a 4-star general. And he was able to get into the program and use his authority and his access. I think they call that a super user. The super user that access to all specialized access programs. So he had his capability to be able to put into that whole thing. It's fortunate to meet Dave Rush at the behest of Jay Stratton. Dave was a NRO liaison officer to the UAP task force, and Dave was working for his boss at the NRO, which is situated in the second floor skiffs of the Aerospace Corporation building in Colorado Springs. And I was assigned to work at the Aerospace Corporation facility in Huntsville, Alabama, because I was supporting NASA's Space Nuclear Propulsion Program office. So Jay put Dave and Dave's boss and I together, and I briefed them for 2.5 days, just the week before COVID struck. And Dave took all of my classified and proprietary information of all the investigations I did at NIDS, AFRL, and working for Help Put Off at EarthTech, and he took that data and ran with it. And what you now know, the aftermath of that was his classified whistleblower complaint to the IG of the IC. And so there's a there. We have had this program going on in various guises, various code names. Code names change roughly every 3 years. They often shift around due to major office and programmatic reorganizations from presidential administration, or maybe every 5 to 10 years in some cases. And so these things are very old. They come in, they've gone, but they're still around. And the amount of money that's been involved, I would say, since the beginning in 1944 with the first recovery ability of the U.S. Army's recovery of the craft that crashed in Italy back in 1933. The United States Army, when it invaded Italy and pushed the Third Reich out, they were able to recover that craft and bring it back to Wright Airfield. And all of the crash retrievals that are taking place generally on land have gone to Wright Airfield. The majority of the crash retrievals or recoveries of whatever situation it was take place in the maritime environment. And I'm not sure where that is going. I think they're probably also going to were in those days Wright Airfield. I don't know where they're going today, though, because I've only worked on the legacy history of this part of it up until about the early 2010s. And ever since the end of the OSAP and the ATIP, I don't know where those operations are going on these days. So I think that's about it, Lou.
Is that
If I ask a question, I would always ask, and I'll just say this really easily. Leslie King and Ralph Linenthal asked me this for an interview I gave them in July of 2020 for the New York Times article that they published. They interviewed Lou and former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. I think Harry was already retired then, wasn't he? Yeah. Okay, so I said basically my interface with the leadership at the industry, which were different individuals, is the following. The craft that have been recovered are not of this earth. They're not made by human hands. They are not from this planet. They are not human. They are an alien technology, whatever the word alien means. Are they extraterrestrial? We don't know. We don't know. What motives do they have? Well, we need anthropologists and social psychologists and philosophers to figure that out because they haven't communicated that to us. Yeah. So physicists like me and Avi, we cannot answer questions like motive. We just need to take data. We call it measurements and signals intelligence in the intelligence industry. And Avi, I support 1,000% because we need him to do what he needs to do. UAPX is another group from the University of Albany in New York. They're doing that as well. And there are other groups out there building up their own sensor suites to try to scan the sky full-time 24/7 to look for something that's high, and definitely not weather, definitely not an aircraft, and definitely not a kid's little quadcopter.
Can you please explain what makes exotic material that has been recovered from the U.S. government exotic? What makes it different from atomically and chemically?
It's actually a very simple answer. It's the way it's fabricated. It's the way it's fabricated. That's what makes it exotic. It's not a new element that's never been discovered and placed on the periodic table of elements. No. The materials are in the periodic tables. They're either radioactive isotopes that we already know of, or they're any of the other non-radioactive, non-actinide elements on the table. It's just the combination of the materials is unusual. It could be that you could say that that's exotic, but it's the composition. It's how you built the craft, the materials that form the craft, and everything inside the craft. It's quite exotic because one of the company's leadership was a young material scientist when he graduated with his doctorate in material science from one of the universities in Illinois back in 1970. And he was hired by Ben Rich to work with him and a team at Skyburst. That was the Advanced Projects Development Agency, I think is what Lockheed Aircraft Company called them back in those days. So basically, this is what he was telling me. He's an advanced material scientist, and he said, well, we could use the best diagnostic equipment we had back in those days, which was 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And we could see the elements through mass spectroscopy that compose these structures. But when we look at how they're composed and structured, it's like nothing we've been able to fabricate on Earth. We've never been able to produce it on Earth. And we have no extrapolated engineering or physics technology to tell us or inform us on how we could possibly learn how to fabricate this on Earth. So they understood that it's the combination of the elements was very unusual. It was counterintuitive, but it's the way the materials are fabricated. That's what makes it exotic.
Representative Wilson, go ahead, sir. 4 years.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Davis, but I wanted to ask before this panel's over, I want to pull some threads here. What is your understanding of the physics or the likely propulsion technology? What is your assessment of what the capabilities are and how it's being achieved? And then also, I want to ask about materials and energy as well.
We can only speculate. These things are so far in advance. We can only speculate. The best speculation I can come up with is Jim Moulton. He does a great job predicting something like a warp bubble. UAP do exhibit the phenomenon of sublight or less than light speed warp bubbles. However, that becomes a challenge when you talk about UAP that dive into the ocean and climb it down from under the ocean and up in the air. So
it's not warping space-time.
That's a warping space-time. Yeah.
Oh, it is.
That's described in Einstein General Theory.
Yeah.
And so the problem is
doesn't gravity warp space-time?
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
So these objects are changing space-time around them.
Yeah. They have a thin shell of energy, and the type of energy it has to be would have to be negative energy density, and it would be consistent with the type of energy density that you can create from the quantum vacuum. And examples of that are the Casimir cavity that has a little vacuum region that's bound by the two plates of the cavity. There's also squeeze states of light, where that's a laser beam, where you're going to take some part of canonical noise fluctuations from out of that part of the beam you're not interested in and pile it up elsewhere in the phase space, and this is getting really technical. So I'll just tell you it this way. You're going to take the quantum vacuum fluctuation that we know as quantum noise or shot noise and laser, you're going to pile it up somewhere else in an area you're not interested in measuring, and you only want to measure the amplitude of that beam. At that point, when you take the quantum vacuum fluctuations out of that amplitude, that energy density goes negative. And the energy density is the square of the amplitude. So that goes negative. And that's an example of negative energy. The mass of the Earth creates space-time curvature.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, so that space-time curvature, which we feel supports the gravity on the surface of the Earth, drags down quantum vacuum fluctuations of the quantum fields that are out in space near the Earth, in the vicinity of the Earth. And that energy density happens to be negative. And so this is an example of theoretically predicted astronomical sources of negative energy as well as planetary sources of negative energy. So that's what you would need to build more of. And that's what you would need to build a constructed shell.
Just a brief comment of clarification. We have two pillars of modern physics, quantum mechanics and Einstein's theory of gravity, which is curvature of space-time.
Right.
We don't have a reliable theory that combines
That's right.
quantum gravity. So what we are hearing is speculation. We do not have the knowledge to figure out if you can create curvature of space-time with negative energy density because we have never mastered this. We don't have an understanding of that. So it's possible that, a millennium from now, we'll have those quantum gravity engineers. That's possible. Currently, we're just like too primitive technologically to figure it out. The question is there something in possession of government that scientists should look into? And I would love to help government figure it out because it may guide us about a theory of quantum gravity if we have something.
Yeah. So we have good ideas about these things, and we can speculate on what the best approach to take to build a work bubble or the shell of negative energy that will create a torsional wormhole, which will be a shortcut through space-time between two distant points. But we have craft in our possession. There are no physicists literally working in those programs. They're basically mechanical, aerodynamics, aerospace, thermal control engineers, electrical engineers, and material scientists. And material science and the part of engineering often usually kind of overlaps chemistry as well. And they've never had a physicist like him or I. They've never had an applied physicist or an experimental physicist. And so they are really lacking in the ability to understand how these things fly.
Sort of the legacy programs are very insulated and insular. So unfortunately, it's a bit of a, forget my approach here, but a bit of an incestuous community. There's not a whole lot of outside involvement because it is so highly classified. And that's been some of the frustration and I think challenges, technologically speaking, because we haven't been able to recently apply new talent, new ideas, new theories to what may be, what the U.S. government may be in possession of.
Yeah. What about the energy potential?
The energy is a question
To
of
accomplish some things we're seeing, right?
Yeah, I haven't been able to access that.
Dr. Davis, can you talk for a moment, about the limits and the calculations for the object to go from 80,000 feet within less than a second, 50 feet over the water? What type of energy requirement are you talking about?
Hundreds of times the total electrical energy produced in the United States annually. That's the kind of energy that is representative of the observed features and performances of UAP craft, especially the Tic Tac that the Nimitz encountered in November of 2004. And so it's hundreds and hundreds of times what the United States produces annually electrical power. And so that compares really well with interstellar spacecraft that would travel relativistic or ultra-relativistic being anywhere from 90 to 99%. Like the energy is astronomically huge. So these craft, I don't have the security clearances I need to know to get access to the technical details, but I need to understand that the craft are consistent in size with the Tic Tac, even double in size of the Tic Tac. That would be up to about 100 feet long by 50 feet diameter of that type, boomerang-shaped craft, arrow-shaped craft, triangle-shaped craft, and so forth. The biggest ones that have been observed, especially that we investigated at UNS in 1999, involving Scott Air Force Base. That one was a 600-foot long craft, and it was about roughly 100 feet tall. And so they don't have possession of craft like that. I've never been told that. It's usually the more manned scale type.
So that they couldn't move.
Yeah.
So we might be able to
Yeah, so we can only speculate. I know Joe Kasky wrote in his book, I don't remember the title of it, but anyway, it was Colin Keller, who I worked with at NIDS, and George Knapp of KLS TV in Las Vegas. And so Jim mentioned, and Jim was the program manager for the AAS, the OSAP, the AAS WAP, I think it was. And so basically he described in his book, somebody, I don't know if it was him because he never, I think he said it was him, went inside one of these craft that he had access to, and they couldn't recognize any propulsion or power devices or systems inside the craft. It was complete confusion. Travis Taylor and I have speculated that possibly they're teleporting energy from a remote distant location where the energy is produced is teleported to the craft. And that's how the craft can move around without having to carry propellant or a rocket engine or an advanced warp drive engine on it. That's one possibility that we're speculating on.
On the material, so what you have me thinking is carbon can take multiple forms, right? And are you saying that is the same with other material, other elements? The way in which what we found is different forms of these elements that we have.
It would be different elements. It'd be different combinations of the elements.
And isotopic ratios as well, correct?
Yeah. So you're going to have a variety of whatever structural part of this that came off of UAP. I don't know because I didn't have this way better knowledge of SAP access. I only had GSSCI. So at the SCI level, I was informed that there would be combinations of elements from the periodic table, combinations of their isotopes. So you have a variety of elements as they naturally occur, or some isotopes of them mixed together in a certain way, and then they're structurally built in a very unusual way that even today we have no equivalent or analog to. So this is about as much as I was given information at an SCI moment.
Do you have, or can you comment on whatever species have been that have been piloting these craft? How are they large? Are they multiple species? Are they what was their size, and how many are usually on a craft?
They're typically the multiple species. People are familiar with the grays and Arctics. People have talked about reptilians and insectoids. It's not that they're reptilian or insectoid, it's that they resemble to the percipient, a reptile or an insect type humanoid, because they have this head and forelimbs and torso. So
Large, small,
human size, human scale.
and are there how many are in crew?
Well, the grays I'm familiar with from investigating the crash at Corona, which is misnamed the crash at Roswell. It's not the crash at Roswell, it's the crash at Corona in Mexico. Those were grays, those are 4 foot tall. And the Nordics are typically human size, probably, I've heard 5-6 feet tall. And same with the people who mislabel reptilian and insectoid, they're roughly that top height too. I haven't heard anything about anything 7 or 8 feet or 9 feet tall. Just of that nature.
So that was Dr. Eric Davies speaking during a recent House Oversight briefing. What stood out to you? Let me know in the comments, because these conversations matter. We're hearing confirmations of crash retrievals, references to materials beyond our current capabilities, and the outline of programs that have operated in the shadow for decades. If you want to go deeper, the link to the full hearing is in the description below. Watch it, and if this episode resonated with you, like, share, and support the podcast. That's how these voices reach more people. Now, before we wrap, I want to highlight something that points to where this may be headed. We're entering into what many now call the age of disclosure, and figures like Dr. Davies, alongside others in the UAP Disclosure Fund, are becoming part of a wider movement towards transparency. A new documentary is on the way, and the trailer has been released. It gives a glimpse into what's coming. If you haven't seen it yet, this is your moment. Let's roll the trailer.
The American people are ready to receive the truth.
Humanity is not the only intelligence in the universe.
Humanity is not the only intelligent species.
We are absolutely not alone.
Non-human intelligence exists.
UAPs are real.
They're here and they're not human. I spent 25 years as a senior official with the CIA.
I worked on highly classified UAP programs.
28 years as an astrophysicist.
I served as the 4th Director of National Intelligence.
Director of Aviation Security in the National Security Council.
A one-star admiral after 32 years of service.
People that come forward with this, I feel like they've taken their life in their own hands.
I was recruited to a highly sensitive government program that investigated unidentified aerial phenomenon.
For over 16 years, on behalf of the U.S. government, I worked as a senior intelligence official on the unidentified aerial phenomenon topic.
We learned that the U.S. government was involved in a long-running secret war with other nations to collect and reverse engineer vehicles not made by humans.
I have seen with my own eyes non-human craft and non-human beings.
So look at that thing. It's rotating. There's a whole fleet of them.
The first country that cracks the code on this technology will be the leader for years to come.
China has established its own version of a UAP task force.
You think for a second that they wouldn't consider using it to achieve their ends of domination?
This is similar to the Manhattan Project. This is the atomic weapon on steroids.
This is so secret, very, very few people in our entire government have been allowed access to it.
Even presidents have been operating on a need-to-know basis, but that begins to ramp out of control.
It's not acceptable to have secret parts of government that no one ever sees.
You better be careful about a government that doesn't trust its people, because there's no telling what they'll pull on you.
This is the biggest discovery in human history.
You had information being locked away that could change the trajectory for species.
It has so many beneficial impacts, including clean energy.
We should have disclosure today. We should have disclosure tomorrow. The time has come.
What else you want to know?